Hey, so this episode's gonna be with the former Navy SEAL and SEAL Team 6 member, Stephen Giblin. Super cool guy. I'm recording this after the episode. Super knowledgeable, super cool, super fun, funny, likable. All the good traits in a person, very smart and wise. Yeah. Hopefully you like the episode. Alright? See I guess, in a second.
Google Meet. So, and I'm going to just screen record it too to make sure that it. So how's it going?
Going very well. Going very well.
It's good.
What got you doing this?
You know, I didn't see anything wrong with doing it. You know, it can only benefit me.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a different age, different new technologies and things like that. But I don't think I've ever. Well, I guess I've seen it on the news, but podcasters, younger podcasters. Yeah. I mean, this is good. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just started it. I like doing it. And I make it for me, and people just happen to watch it. That's what I like to say. So
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, so you've lived this kind of like interesting journey from, like a high school like kid who immediately went into being a Navy SEAL and, becoming part of a task force, like strike force for Osama bin Laden for a short time. And you said you were retired when he was caught, but just tell people who you are, because it's a really fascinating journey.
Well, so when I joined the Navy, I was just looking for something to do to get, away from home, kind of out from under my father. I was 17 years old, right out of high school, had zero interest in going to college. I didn't care for being in school. I wasn't a world-class student, that's for sure. And so when I joined the Navy, I didn't even know what SEAL teams were. And all I was going to do was do 4 years in the Navy, maybe pick up a trade, and then I was going to actually come back home and either, be a firefighter or a policeman like my father. And so while I was in boot camp, that was the first time I met a SEAL, and I scored well enough on the physical fitness test in boot camp where he pulled me aside and asked me what I was going to be doing in the Navy. And I was wasn't sure what he was getting at. I told him what I was supposed to be doing, and he asked me if I was interested in being a Navy SEAL. And I had no idea what one was. I told him so. So he showed me this film, and anybody could look it up on YouTube. It's an old Navy SEAL recruiting video or a movie called Men with Green Faces. And so that was the movie that he showed me. And after that, I kept going back to keep on taking the test, the physical screening test for going to BUD/S. But also I wanted, Navy boot camp back then, you didn't do a lot of, you did nightly PT, physical training, but it wasn't really intense. And I had grown up every night, going to the gym with my father, doing intense workouts. Everything from weightlifting to, playing handball, racquetball, things like that. But it was always very competitive in my family. And so I wanted more of that. And also trying to convince this guy and to show this guy that I really wanted to go to BUD/S bad, and for him to try and work on getting me some orders to BUD/S, changing my orders. Well, that didn't work out. I ended up going to the fleet, spent about a year in the fleet, a year on an aircraft carrier, which in hindsight was a great experience for me because it taught me about the Navy. It made me realize, that there was something else out there for me in the Navy, that I didn't necessarily want to be, part of the fleet in that way. So that kept me hungry. when I got back from my Western Pacific deployment, my 7-month deployment on the carrier, I kind of forced and really cajoled my way to getting orders, because you don't do that as a first termer, and you don't get to change orders that quick. I got approval to do it. I went to Buds in April of 1983. And at the time, training was only 6 months long. And I graduated Buds September of 1983. So 40 years ago, actually. My Buds class is having our 40th reunion this year. But anyway, that was kind of, in short, that was how I got into the SEAL teams.
Was there any Hell Week like there is now, or was it?
Oh, Hell Week hasn't changed in 50, 60 years. The
Exact same process.
Names and faces have changed, but the intent is still there. A total of 4 hours of sleep, continuous physical activity, and you get 4 square meals a day, but you don't get to sleep much, and it is a grueling evolution. But what a lot of people don't understand is that once you make it through Hell Week, you still have first phase to finish, and then you have to go into second phase, which is diving phase. Diving phase is complicated and physically demanding in its own way. You're still doing these grueling PTs. Matter of fact, they ramp everything up. You're supposed to run a faster 4-mile time run, a faster 2-mile ocean swim. You're doing more push-ups, more sit-ups, more dips, more pull-ups than you did in first phase. But what you're not doing in second phase, the dive phase, you're not doing log PT, some of the first phase evolutions. You're not paddling IDS boats, the small inflatable boats through, doing surf passage and things like that. But what you are doing is you're learning how to scuba dive, the very basics of scuba diving, combat swimmer, using an attack board, navigating underwater, things like that. But the rigors of Buds are still there. And one of the big milestones in second phase is what we call pool competency. You have to tread water with steel twin 80s tanks. You have to tread water for 5 minutes with those tanks on, without buoyancy. You have to pass another milestone, another test gate, where we call it pool harassment. And it was basically the instructors stripping the regulator out of your mouth, ripping your tanks off, getting you disoriented, pulling your mask off, and you're not allowed to do an emergency surface. You have to regroup below surface, get your tanks back on, turn your air back on, get your mask back on, get your bottles back on the right way, and then and only then can you get a thumbs up from the instructor and you're good to go, and you're allowed to surface. So a lot of guys don't pass that. You'd be surprised. So guys make it all the way through Hell Week, through first phase, get into second phase, and then they fail in second phase. Third phase is the demolition, land warfare, weapons phase, land navigation, things like that. Gets a little bit easier, but now you're really learning more and more how to be a SEAL from second phase on. And when you finish Buds, now graduating from Buds is very, very low key, because you go right into SEAL qualification training from there, which is another 6 months of training. And more miles to run, more miles to swim, just more and more and more and more. So at the end of the day, it's about 56 weeks of training. And then you show up to a SEAL team, and then you're a new guy. And you have to start all over again.
Was there ever a point where you questioned doing it? Like, was there ever a point where you maybe even wanted to give up, or? Not
really. I was 19 years old. I really didn't have a plan beyond my nose. It was just like, hey, just get through training one day at a time. And, you get that done, you wake up the next morning and you got a whole new day. So then you just keep pushing forward. Was buds easy for me? No, not at all. But, for a 19-year-old kid, life could be, there's so much worse that could be going on in a 19-year-old's life than being at buds.
So there was never any points where you maybe need to motivate yourself like mentally a bit more, or you felt like a bit down or in out,
Yeah, during Hell Week. During Hell Week, I hit a low during one of our evolutions, and I almost quit. And actually, one of my instructors turned me back around. He said, get back with your boat crew. You're not quitting today." And I didn't. So that was my low point. And from then on, it was just go, go, go after that.
It's really remarkable. I mean, the amount of people that even hit like passing the Navy SEALs, let alone actually like having a very long-term career, and it's only like 1% of people that pass, right? Something like that. So, for you to go through this, it's really remarkable. Is there any advice you would give to people that can't seem to motivate themselves to do certain things, that if there was something that you could say to those people that are like, oh, I can't find it in myself to do this, or I can't get up and work out, or I can't get up and do this, what would you say to them?
You need to find your purpose. You need to find your purpose as to, why you're doing what you want to do. So if something as simple as getting a gym membership because you thought you wanted to go to the gym, and then you decide you don't want to do it, you need to examine why you decided you didn't want to do it. Is it too hard? Hard things are good in our life. Having challenges in your life are what make life special. And a lot of people, life isn't easy, life isn't fair. And doing things that challenge yourself are what help prepare you for that unfairness in life. It helps build you mentally and physically to get through these hard times, but it also gives you kind of just again, as the example of going to the gym, it gives you an escape. It gives you a place to go and to, exert energy. And then by the time you're done and you get home, man, you're like, whew, you're all, that's how I felt anyway when I was in high school. I was like, well, that was a great day, So, I mean, as far as finding a motivation to do something, I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, what's my purpose? What is it that I really want to do?
So how, because I've questioned this myself of, because I was thinking of making a video about this too, of how purpose works and trying to break it down. I've watched videos about it, but how does somebody actually find their purpose? Because it seems like this very convoluted thing sometimes for some people, but also just very, very simple for others. Like for some people, they can just go in a dark room for a couple hours and they'll know what to do. They think for a little bit. Other people, they need this really traumatic event, near-death experience. Other people, they just know it from the day they're born to the day they die. So for the people that can't find their purpose, how would you go about doing that or fixing that?
Finding something you're passionate about first. Now, there's passion about something, and then there's purpose. And for people that are passionate about things, that's great. Passion is a wonderful thing. Purpose is derived from passion at times. So if your purpose is to be an engineer and you're passionate about it and you do very well at it, then you found your purpose. I've got a good high school friend of mine that went to college. He got a full academic ride and became an engineer. Got into the business, got to his company, and he said, you know what? I really don't like doing this. Thought I would, but I don't. So he went back to college and got his law degree. And now he's a lawyer and he loves it. Never in a million years did he think he wanted to be a lawyer. But it ended up, he ended up discovering, studying the law, and he liked it. He found his passion, and it ended up being his purpose in life. And he's an excellent lawyer, and he's making a great living at it. So, there's these things, and there's guys in the SEAL teams that thought that this would be their purpose in life, and they do a couple of deployments overseas, and they just discovered that it's not necessarily for them, and they go ahead and they leave, and that's fine. If every guy that ever graduated BUD/S made a full career out of it, there wouldn't have been any room for guys like me to keep progressing up. And it's just like football players, or any other kind of professional athlete, or any other kind of even just profession. People come and go all the time, and it's those people that stick around for the longest time, the longest period, make a career of it. Those are the people that found their purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand. So from that, if I might ask, what do you think that your purpose is?
Now or then?
Both.
Well, I liked being in the military. I like the structure. I like the discipline. I liked being on deployments. I liked going overseas, and whether it was a combat deployment or just a routine deployment, which the Navy does all the time. A lot of people, up until 9/11, a lot of what I'll refer to as the conventional forces within the Air Force, the Army, they didn't do routine 6-month deployments. The Marine Corps and the Navy always have. Long before I ever came into the military, they would, they embark on a ship or they fly overseas, and they spend 6 months overseas training with partner nations, conducting operations, things like that, and then they come home. They regroup, train, and then deploy again. That's kind of the thing that makes people decide that it's either for them or not for them, is just that do loop, doing it over and over again. And with these intermittent breaks of a year or two, going off to instructor duty or what we call shore duty or things like that, where you still stay within your profession, but you're doing other things, like a BUD/S instructor. A BUD/S instructor, he leaves the team for 2 years, goes to BUD/S, teaches students, instructs them, puts them through training, and then he goes back to a team. And that's kind of our cycle. So I liked it. And, I didn't take really necessarily a conventional route within the SEAL teams. I went to SEAL Team 6 and stayed there for 14 years. That I really liked a lot. We weren't on combat operations every week or anything. It's not like the movie or the TV show SEAL Team. There was a lot of years where it was just a lot of training for not much of anything. The occasional deployment, not occasional deployment, we always deployed, but the rare occasional combat deployment. So, or not even, it may not even be combat. You're on an operational deployment to do something else. And it could be a whole lot of other things. And without getting into that, which I can't, that's what keeps you hungry, is still going overseas and doing meaningful, purposeful work that is for the betterment of the nation, our country, and kind of just moving things forward, if you will.
So you found purpose to some extent in the journey itself.
Absolutely. If I could have stayed in for 40 years, I would have. I would have loved to, but at the time, Navy only allowed you to stay in for 30 years at that time. And there was a set of orders that I didn't want to take, that it was kind of it was very much a double-edged sword. I wanted to stay in, but my organization wanted me to go someplace where, we still had combat operations going on, and I would not have been involved. And so it's kind of, but they had this need for me to be there, a SEAL Master Chief, to be someplace overseas. And that just I didn't want that. And I didn't want that ending my career, if you get it, right? I would have ended up going to Korea for my last 2 years in the Navy. And number one, there was nothing going on in Korea. Number two, I would have had to leave my wife and kids behind. And that's just not how I wanted to end my last 2 years. So I retired out of BUD/S, and that was good enough for me. So that was 28 years.
So what do you do now? Like, because we spoke a bit about this, you said that you worked out a little bit, you go to the gym, you shoot, so what is your daily look like every day? What would a Monday look like for you?
Monday, or just any day, really. I don't know. I like to read a lot. I like to read. I devour the news. I read books. I've got a couple of books, got a whole thing of books back here, but I read books, I read the news, I go to the gym, hang out with my wife. We go and do things, go and do a lot of the things that we couldn't do when we were both still working. We both did 37 years working for the government. And a lot of times there was vacation that we couldn't take together, or take time off together. So that's, we still have a whole lot of things to do as a husband and wife that we weren't really able to do, back when we were still working. So, being retired, still trying to get used to the idea of being retired. I've been retired now for 5 years and 6 years. So getting used to this concept, and then still finding something else to do that, maybe a new passion just for us. I told you that I wanted to, give golf a try. I'm a terrible golfer, but it gives me something to try and do, and that's to get better. And right now I live in Arizona. I plan on dying in Arizona. So while I'm in Arizona, up until the day I die, why not keep on trying to improve my golf game?
Should probably talk to my dad about that. He's a masterful golf player.
Is he?
Yeah, he's pretty good. Or so I've been told. He loves the game. Plays it every other day. Actually, I think he just played it today with my cousin. But yeah, I mean, what life is all about, enjoying yourself, working hard, finding fulfillment in the little things.
Yeah.
Yeah. To switch the topic a little bit, I spoke to you and I read a little bit about this as I was listening to some of your other interviews. It was about Osama bin Laden, and you said it. I heard, I was reading different things, said that you were part of it, like the strike force or whatever against him. And I spoke to you a little bit about it, and you said that you weren't as big of a part of it. But what was exactly the situation with him? Who was he to you?
Well, so who was he to the country? He was a guy that became one of our worst nightmares. Terrorism kind of took a step up in the 1970s, well into the 1980s. And this thing called terrorism just kept on evolving and moving forward. He was very much a part of that. He started his activities when he was in Afghanistan fighting against the Russians. And he was with the Mujahideen. And what they didn't like was obviously Russians coming into Afghanistan. He's there with his brothers. He's Saudi Arabian by birth. But in the Middle East, they've got a saying, my enemy's enemy's mine. So here's this invading force on another Middle Eastern country, and their job, they felt, was to push them out, to fight them, to get them out, much like what they did to us for 20 years, right? The guy was born in 1957. He's college educated. He was the son of the largest construction businessmen in the nation of Saudi Arabia, in the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So he had wealth on his side. He became an engineer by trade, got into the family business, but he found his passion, and that was terrorism. You know, being a holy warrior, that was his passion. And what he didn't want was, he didn't want any Western countries having anything to do in Saudi Arabia. You know, the two holiest cities in the Islamic faith are Mecca and Medina. And to have Westerners in the country of, you know, the holy sites of Islam, that was just terrible and egregious to him. He made it his purpose to combat this, to fight and to push people out. And the only way that he knew how was to create acts of terrorism and to also kind of spread the word as a prophet, if you will. And he went to all these different countries and trying to do this. He ended up being exiled out of Saudi Arabia, went to the Sudan, and that's where he opened up his first terrorist camp. From the Sudan, he ended up in Somalia in 1993 when U.S. forces were there for humanitarian aid, and he started wreaking havoc. That's where he made a name for himself. He was loosely tied to the first World Trade Center bombings that did not take down the trade centers, but that put his name on the map for the United States. Mid-1990s, that's when I first got involved in the Bin Laden cell. I wasn't a founding member of the Bin Laden cell. I was just brought in. We did training, finding out the why we were after this guy, and leading to, trying to make plans and operations on this moving target. This guy that's constantly moving from one country to another. Where is he keeping his money? Where's he, he's trafficking his money. He's trafficking weapons. He's trafficking foreign fighters. This guy was the epicenter of terrorism in the Middle East. He was a facilitator. This guy made sure that fighters, weapons, and explosives made their way from one country to another to fight against Western countries. So World Trade Center bombings and also the embassy bombings in Africa, that's what put him on our #1 most wanted list. 1998, President Clinton tried to strike this training camp that he was at. We missed him, and that just sort of elevated things. And then 9/11 happened. 9/11 occurred, and we found out without a doubt he was part of this. Not just part of it, he was the ringleader of the 9/11 attacks. So that was why we went into Afghanistan, was to find this guy, and which ended up being America's longest war. My involvement stopped when I left SEAL Team 6. So my part in all of that was to learn and train guys that were under me, doing the things that we were doing, training for operations against him. Everything shifted right after 9/11. It went from being, kind of under the radar operations to full on invasion and assault and trying to dig this guy out of whatever wormhole he was hiding in. So that's kind of, in short, that's the evolution of Bin Laden and my involvement with that. My involvement was done right after I left SEAL Team 6 in August of 2001.
Have you ever met the person or the people that had any involvement with his assassination, or I should say attempted capture?
Yes. I knew several of the guys. One of the guys was the senior enlisted on the ground for the Bin Laden raid. He was one of my junior guys at SEAL Team 6 when I was a senior enlisted. So he and I had a really long, past together. He's a great guy. One of the smartest SEALs that I ever knew. And I mean, what he did was epic. And, leading his guys on the ground for the raid that got Bin Laden.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really incredible story. the capture and the takedown of bin Laden. I've like listened to it, I've read about it, and in your experience, and this is a question I have about bin Laden himself, in your experience with, learning about him, investigating him and such, was he insane, evil, or corrupt? And by corrupt, I mean as in corrupted by power. Evil as in, he just does it because he wants the money or power or something else. Insane would be he thinks that what he's doing is right.
He was already extremely wealthy. He had family money. If he hadn't become a mujahideen early on and stayed with the family business, he would have inherited the family business. And he would have been, millionaire 100 times over, if not a billionaire. So it wasn't that he was looking to get rich. His purpose was he didn't like Western civilization. Everything about it he hated. And if anybody were to look into the Islamic extremists and look at what the Taliban is doing today in Afghanistan, what they brought back, and if you were to compare Western culture with that culture, it just leaves us scratching our heads. We have no idea why they do what they do without truly understanding their culture or their religion. But if you understand the fundamentals of Islam, Islam is not a bad religion. It's the extremists, the Islamic extremists that make it or give it that bad name. Okay, there's nothing in the Quran that says that it's okay to be, to do what they're doing, in the name of Islam. But it's not all Islamic, people. It's not all, Muslims that do this. So bin Laden, I don't believe he was crazy. I don't believe he was driven by greed. He had power, though, over thousands of, fighters that, if not even more, if not into the millions, that were following him like they were disciples. And, what he said was gospel. And that was how he got them to go where they were going, to do what they were doing. And he had lieutenants in his organization that were preaching the same thing. And some of his lieutenants were probably certifiably crazy. He had some really radical guys working for him that would stop at nothing to take out a U.S. serviceman or a politician or anybody, right? So these are the people that really got whacked out on, what it was that he was preaching, right? And a lot of times when people surround themselves with people like that, they tend to believe it even more than what they initially believed, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, mob mentality is always a problem, always has been with any society. One person believes something, everybody else agrees, and it's like a disease sometimes. But
absolutely it is. Look at some of the politics happening in the United States.
Absolutely, yeah. Terrorist attacks happen in the United States by domestic citizens all the time.
Yeah.
But
militias acting on their own, thinking that it's in the best interest of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. It's terrible, on both sides, and it happens all the time. Follow-up question about Osama bin Laden. I believe it was either last year or months ago, Joe Biden announced that they had assassinated Ayman al-Zawahiri, who was, I should say, the successor, I think, to Osama bin Laden.
Right.
And so what was his role? I heard that he was like his right-hand man, but
he was bin Laden's number 2. And he was the de facto successor to Al-Qaeda. Okay. And, these radical terrorist organizations that are affiliated with Islam, they're not really sticking together. There's all these different factions that are fighting their own fight. ISIS is a good one. There's even radical arms of ISIS. There's radical arms of the Taliban. If you were to take just the basic theory that they have on, why it is that they're doing what they're doing, I think it all can fit into one box as to why they are doing what they're doing. Some of these organizations want more power. They want to rule over any Islamic country, and they want to, influence their will, right? In this society, and make it what their utopia might be. I don't think bin Laden really, he and al-Zawahiri, their utopia was a Middle East without Western civilization involved. That was it. Al-Zawahiri had a way of, he was just as influential as bin Laden was, and that was why the United States took him out. And we're continuing to just kind of chop away at all these different organizational leaders of these terrorist organizations. We've created this system, this mechanism, if you will, of government, U.S. special operations, primarily the tier 1 organization, going after these guys and taking them out very systematically and very successfully. Our kill ratio is through the roof on taking these guys out compared to what our losses or damages are.
So, and here's a question about the assassination of Ayman al-Zawahiri. So, with Osama bin Laden, originally the intention was to capture him, but, if they had to kill him, then unfortunately that's just the way things had to go. So, with Ayman, why didn't they just capture him, or was that the original intention? If you might have any knowledge on that, or
we were already out of Afghanistan. So having forces go back into Afghanistan just to get him would have been a suicide mission. He was well protected, well insulated. The Taliban were everywhere. Al-Qaeda were everywhere. Going in there to get the guy was considered high risk by, trying to extract him out alive. Taking him out with, a Hellfire missile fired from a drone, mission accomplished. So we still had eyes on the ground, but you're talking 1 or 2 people that, under deep cover, able to put eyes on, positively ID the guy, and then vector in, the missile, the Hellfire, and take him out. Either way, either you send him to trial, by an international court, or you take him out right there on the spot. Either way, you cut the head off the snake.
right? So it was a matter of just simplicity,
right? And he was just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than bin Laden.
Why is that?
So over the 20 years, figuring out what the weaknesses are of any Western country and still being able to push people into those countries, these sleeper cells, and activate them at any given time. If you look at the advancement of the U.S. military, as far as technology goes, from 2001 all the way up until current day, 2023, our technology has just gone through the roof as far as the things that we could do now, right? Compared to what we couldn't do in 2001. They are just the same. They exploit commercial off-the-shelf technology. They don't have a research and development shop like we do, but they've got guys who are just as smart. They have engineers. They have people that are willing to go above and beyond to attack Western civilization and carry these things out. But there's also some of these low-tech terrorist attacks. Take a look at Paris and what was going on in there. France's vulnerability is they already had people in the country that are just waiting for the word to attack. The U.S. has stopped a number of additional terrorist attacks on U.S. soil by Islamic radicals. Okay, doesn't make the paper every day, if at all, but it is happening weekly, monthly, a dozen a year that are happening, that where these guys are being stopped. FBI pulls over a car and the trunk is loaded with, assault rifles and rockets and explosives. That's not a lie. That actually happened, and it happened in your home state of New Jersey. So these things are taking place, and those are low-level, low-tech attacks. But nonetheless, that is the basis of a terrorist attack: to create fear, to create mayhem, to create chaos. And some of these guys, the worst one that happened in France a couple of years ago, where these guys were a rock concert, right, or outside of a concert, explosions going on, people dying in the streets, this massive shootout, and mission accomplished. Or the random, what people would see as this random radical Islamic guy wielding a knife, stabbing and slashing people. That is a low-tech terrorist attack. So by taking out these leaders that point their finger at a map and say, I want this done and I want it done here, and then their lieutenant saying, I got a guy, they contact that guy, and then that guy goes and does what he's supposed to do without question. So that's what we are constantly trying to stop now.
So, are you familiar with? I believe her name is Annie Jacobson. She's I'm probably getting her name wrong. I get a lot of people's names wrong, but this lady, she was a journalist. She worked with a lot of CIA operatives, and kind of like studied how like assassination operations and such worked with the U.S. government, internationally speaking, and such. And in terms of what she studied was that the U.S. government will do that if it's necessary to take down a terrorist. How often does that happen compared to the captures? Like, if there was a ratio for every kill, how many captures?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you with any level of certainty at all. I'll tell you, if you're peeling that news onion every day and finding out what happens overseas, and you're in the various news feeds or even chat rooms or things like that, you'll find out we are conducting operations every day globally. We're still all over the Middle East. We're all over Europe. We're all over Indonesia. Indonesia is another radical Islamic hotbed, and whether we are doing it ourselves or working with partner nation forces, allies of ours that they are the host country, and we're helping them with intelligence, and they go execute the raid. That's just another operation that's happening because they don't want it in their country either. These guys, these radicals are, Indonesia is predominantly, I think they're like 95% Muslim. Okay, and you've got these radical Islamic Muslims that are blowing up, car bombs and blowing up markets and things like that, just because they want to create this fear and this narrative that their country's leadership isn't protecting the citizens. So if you put in our guy that we want, then everything will be okay, right? Not the case. But that's the kind of thing that they do.
So another thing too, with regards to international operations and such, we spoke a little bit about this. It was with regards to Osama bin Laden, and it was about how Pakistan essentially protected him to some extent, and was aware. Were they aware? I've watched movies.
How could you not be aware? This rich guy that fits a description of bin Laden moves into your neighborhood in a large home that's got 15-foot walls around it, not your average yard, and nobody comes in and out, a lot. And yeah, I mean, it was right underneath their noses. And it was a town that was basically the equivalent of, our West Point or Annapolis. Their military academy was just, a mile or two away. And it's some of Pakistan's brightest and best leaders that they have were right there. How could they not know? And Pakistan has the habit of speaking out of both sides of their mouth. They don't want the U.S. breathing down their neck, but at the same time, they'll harbor somebody like bin Laden without question. Because what they don't want in their own backyard is those things that I described that are happening around the world, where, car bombings and, terrorist attacks of other natures, happening on a daily basis. Guess what? It's still happening in Pakistan. And, the Pakistan arm of Al Qaeda or ISIS or the Taliban, they're doing what they want to do. The border region between Pakistan and Afghanistan, it's the Wild West. And these guys are, they're having shootouts and, whatever every day.
So they thought they could cut some kind of a deal almost by letting them go.
Well, it's harboring a fugitive. And what, we can, without getting into specifics, we did some things where they wouldn't know that we were coming in. That's all I could tell you.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, in general, Pakistan just knew and was aware, and they were willing to help him. And another question about him, and it was about the prior operations into investigating him. There was, as I've, kind of listened about it, and I think it was from the man who actually who shot the bullet that killed Osama bin Laden, and it was from different historical videos, that they didn't actually know if it was Osama bin Laden's compound when they went in, but it was just a very, very, very educated guess.
It was within 98 percentile of certainty. So, yeah, they knew. I mean, it's kind of like when Clinton tried to, launch the cruise missile to take out bin Laden in 1998. You're going to launch the missile leaves, you can't call it back. It's going to hit the compound, but you've got a 98% certainty that the guy is there. Well, we missed him. He had just left. That 2% factored in, and he was gone. We didn't get him. Him or Zawahiri, who were there, and some of their lieutenants, right? So that's kind of that risk you take. It's a calculated risk. We wouldn't have done it if there was a 50-50 chance of him being there or not. So putting together all these pieces of the puzzle to figure out if the guy is there or not, that's what our intelligence organizations do. That's what our other intelligence agencies do. The CIA, the NSA, and all the other EIEIOs, right? All the other three-letter agencies, coupled together with our military intelligence. And so we string together an operation. And we're getting better and better at it. So remember earlier, I was talking about technology. And, they shot imagery of his compound, of this guy that was pacing in the compound. And they measured the length of his body, of the grainy image. And the best educated guess was, that's him. That's the guy. So, you go in, you conduct the raid. If he's there, and you take him, either dead or alive. It was a capture-kill mission.
Yeah, I mean, it happened, and let me ask you this, though. What is domestically, in terms of just in general, terrorist organizations, domestically speaking, what is probably the greatest concern right now, or should be?
Another World Trade Center incident, possibly using explosives, or I should actually say the Oklahoma City bombing. Okay, that was, it was very crude, but I mean, look at the destruction that they did, right? The innocent lives that were killed, that were just wiped off the face of the earth with one truck bomb. That is probably our biggest threat that we face. It's not, this random idiot running around with an assault rifle that is, that's going to shoot a dozen people. I mean, that's tragic in itself, even one life lost. I think the biggest concern is a truck bomb.
My question would be then, how do we prevent terrorism as a whole?
That's ongoing every day. So, the federal agents, law enforcement, screening people's Facebook pages. I mean, they just got this guy in Utah that made a threat against the president. And, they were on Truth Social where this guy announced that he was going to do something. It was up to him and he was going to do something. The FBI went knocking on his door. So that's always trying to stay ahead of the game and having law enforcement tactical teams out there that are able to do this sort of thing on a daily basis. And, this is a capability that we didn't have 20 years ago.
Right. To switch topics now, I wanted to ask you a couple more short questions, some of which are going to be longer, but they're questions that we spoke more about, which was, if you could say anything to your younger self, what would it be?
Don't be as impulsive as I was. Save money. Don't live for today. Live for tomorrow. Okay, by saving that money. I spent money like a drunken sailor out on town. I was always living for today. Save at least 10% of whatever it is you make. God, you're making $10, save $1, right? And also, God sakes, own your successes, okay? But that success, you can only ride that for as long as the day is. And last time I checked, every day is only 24 hours. The next day, you have to wake up and realize that was yesterday's success. Today, I got to create another success. And those successes, I love the saying, your success is never owned, it's rented, and rent is due every day. There couldn't have been a more true saying that I ever came across, and I sure as hell wish I would have had it, 40 years ago. And believed it. That's another thing. People read these, or they have these, sayings or euphemisms or whatever you want to call them, and they just spew them out. But do they believe them? Do they take them to heart? It's kind of like finding your passion, right? Or your purpose. People might be, passionate about this one thing. I love it when environmentalists are passionate about, cleaning up the environment, and they're looking at the bigger picture, sucking carbon out of the air, and doing this, that, or the, driving electric vehicles, when in reality, electric vehicles are just as dirty as a gasoline vehicle, right? And matter of fact, mining the materials for these electric vehicles, solar panels, and wind turbines is dirtier than, a standard, what we view as a conventional power plant, whether it be coal or nuclear, right? And these people don't live by this one particular, this code that they have chosen, or this passion that they have. They're just looking at what's right in front of them. You got to look beyond that.
I couldn't have gotten through this interview and podcast without mentioning this guy. But when you said, success is rented every day, I feel like you might know who I'm going to say, but Do you know a man by the name of David Goggins?
Yeah.
Have you ever met him?
Yeah, I knew him when I was at Buds, when I was my last tour, right before I retired, and he was in our recruiting directorate. You know, that's a guy that's got passion, you know, and he's got his purpose, and he is, you know, he's running full steam ahead with it.
Yeah, he's definitely running.
Yeah,
He's running every day. Probably running as we speak.
Probably sideways rain, everything. He's running.
Yeah. So because everybody that I've ever listened to that has ever spoken to him, I'm even reading his book now. Everybody says that he's exactly how he is online. Is that true?
You know what? He wasn't, when I knew him, he wasn't as vocal as he is now. You know, he had a job. He had a job that he had to do at, you know, in his lane, if you will. And I mean, the guy probably wouldn't even be able to pick me out in a lineup if you know, if you asked him about me. But it's, you know, he's got this brand, and he's just like, you know, he's like Jocko, and Jocko's got a great message, right? And these, you know, people that, you know, that listen and want to emulate, that's fantastic. I think it's great if these guys are able to motivate and inspire people to be a better version of themselves every day, then hats off. I love what they're doing.
Did you ever know Jocko?
Yeah, I did.
What
Great
was he
guy.
like?
Great guy. You know, what you see is what you get. He's very intense. Not really sure if I ever saw the guy laugh or not, you know. You know, but when I knew him, he was a lieutenant on the verge of making lieutenant commander. So that was prior to him taking over his task unit and going to Ramadi in Iraq. But still very intense, very focused.
Just for you, when I do the David Goggins interview, I'm gonna make sure to ask him about you.
Ask him if he knows me. All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure to put it in a good word. I'm gonna say that you said nothing but nice things about him.
Great, I appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, speaking of, you know, just life in general, you wrote. I couldn't get through this interview either without asking about this. You wrote this book, Walking in Mud, which I have yet to read. I apologize for that, but from what I've heard, there's a list of 10 rules, right? And you know, I kind of want to ask this just, you know, raw without looking anything up, but what are those rules and what do they entail, if you could briefly summarize?
So this, you know, leaders in our country always looking to inspire, you know, our junior forces, if you will, and you end up with, you know, it's like all these other codes that we have. We got the Cowboy Code, we got the Scouts Law. There was the Bushido Warrior Code, you know, from the 1600s of, you know, the samurai, right? And having a code for warriors is great, and it's meaningful, and it's impactful. And so what this guy had written out on a single sheet of paper was the 10 essential qualities of an underwater demolition man. And these are qualities that he wanted to see every man in his command, you know, exude. Pride in being in the Navy, pride in being a frogman, right? This guy, by the way, this commanding officer was a World War II vet. He was one of the original frogmen from Fort Pierce, Florida, that, you know, did these incredible operations in the Pacific Theater against the Japanese. Just an incredible guy. So pride in service, pride in what you do. And a lot of these translate to just everyday life and what, you know, what you're doing, what other people are doing. Loyalty to not just, you know, the country, but to everything that you stand for. Loyalty to your family, loyalty to your friends, right? Sincerity, being sincere in what you do, right? I think that one's pretty easy for people to understand. Responsibility and taking responsibility for your actions. Example, setting the example. Leaders setting the example, or even your peers, setting example for other peers. You're a wrestler on the high school team, right? Yeah.
Yes, I
So,
am.
teammates setting the example, senior teammates, the juniors setting an example for the sophomores and the freshmen, the seniors setting the example for the juniors, right? Hey, this is how our team works. This is what we do. Kind of taking that load off of the coach a little bit, right? But what does the coach do? The coach sets the example as well, right? So that's a big one for me. Forethought, thinking about, if I do this, this will happen. I'm almost certain of it. So should I do that or not? Right? I was just talking with a neighbor last night. He was talking about his shenanigans as a high schooler and, just throwing eggs at cars. Right. And, if I throw this egg, if I release this egg and it hits this car, what's the reaction going to be? Okay. Maybe I'll hold on to the egg and not throw the egg because this guy's going to get out of his car and beat the hell out of me. Right. That's low level idea, but that's kind of the idea, right? Fairness, treating people with, fairness, treating people the way you expect to be treated, right? And one that's kind of hard for people to wrap your brain around until it's explained, and that's seamanship. So being in the Navy and being a competent seaman, right? Knowing your trade, knowing what your job is, that and being a competent, whether it's being the most competent ditch digger of all ditch diggers, right? Being competent at what you do, being able to dig a straight line, something like that, right? So being a competent seaman is what he wanted from his guys. And then common sense is the 10th one, right? And the old expression, common sense isn't so common anymore. Using common sense, that's, every day my wife and I drive down the road, we'll be at a stoplight and we'll see somebody comes pulling up to the stoplight and they're on their phone. They're looking at their phone and they're only half paying attention to what's going on as far as traffic goes. That there's no common sense in that because that's distracted driving. And people think, oh, I'm such a great driver that, I can do this. I can multitask. And guess what? You can't. You're not as good at it as you think you are. So common sense. That's what this book was about. And, that was the central figure of the book, was this one sheet of paper with these 10 essential qualities. But what I also talked about was life in general and using my life as a metaphor for a lot of these 10 essential qualities. And trust me, it's not all glowing words about my own life. I highlight a lot of my failures, and but I think that's kind of what helps get the point across.
Yeah, I mean, having a good set of rules, a good foundation is always the best thing, or one of the best things that, I find people can do to live a good, fulfilling life a lot of times, maybe not for everybody, for a lot of people.
I think for everybody. I think for everybody. I think you'll agree that, even within your own family, you have rules, you have guidelines. They may not be written down and pasted on the refrigerator, but, there's understandings that you have within the family unit. And if you expand those outside of the family unit, you go to the next sphere of influence that's outside of the family, and it's your close friends. There's do's and don'ts with close friends that you do, right? That you observe. And it just keeps going and going and going and going. And goes out to our society, our culture. And every culture has their written and unwritten rules and a code to live by. This guy just happened to put it down on a sheet of paper. And, he's dead now. He passed away, back, I think, 20, 30 years ago. But guys that I had met, team guys, SEALs, that knew this guy, they said he was probably one of the most exemplary leaders that they had ever met. This guy was just incredible, extremely likable, one hell of a leader, had a great career. And, God, I would have loved to have met the guy. just one of those people.
If there was any either of these rules or just in general, if there was some advice that you would give to any young person, just people that are listening that are young, that want to succeed or just are living life, that want to enjoy, be fulfilled or whatever, what advice would you give them?
Off this list?
Anything.
Anything.
Yeah, anything could be on this list, could be off it, just in your worldview.
Responsibility and accountability. Take the responsibility to do the right thing and accountability for your actions. That's really it. I think I wrote back to you a little bit about one of my pet peeves, and that's this college debt and college loan fiasco that's going on. Yeah, college is expensive. It's very expensive. I understand that. But there's also college students out there that are taking out loans that they can't cover, that they won't ever be able to cover, or that they'll be in debt for over a decade. And and I know my daughter, one of my daughters was my stepdaughter was in a very unique situation where she started off with an academic scholarship, but then there's so many scholarships out there that are being unused. She made a game out of applying for scholarships and actually left college with her 4-year degree with money in the bank. She was debt free when she left college, and that was all her doing. And so it's out there. And I really, in my mind's eye, there's no excuses for leaving college hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, as some of these people are claiming. And I watched an interview last week or 2 weeks ago with this college student that was bemoaning the fact that he thought that the college tuition relief that Biden was pushing through on his first attempt was going to go through. And so he continued to take more debt on while he was in school. To me, that's a foolish thing. That's not being responsible, and that's not being accountable for your own actions. Kind of it in a nutshell for me.
Yeah, I think there was a kid who, I think he did something similar to your stepdaughter, where he applied to, I think, so many different scholarships. He had it was some insane amount of money, like $9 million or whatever. There was like over 100 colleges or whatever that he applied to for scholarships, and he got just this insane amount of money back. Yeah. But I mean, things happen, like that, where
right.
Well,
exploiting these, all of these things, but it's all in line, all legal, and it's out there for the taking. And if there's anybody out there that listens to this podcast, which I'm sure there's hundreds of thousands that'll do that, if you absolutely must go to college, join the military, and Uncle Sam will pay for 4 years of college for you, tuition free. That's huge. And they'll also give you a stipend to live off of while you're going to college for those 4 years. So, last ditch effort, you could always join the military, do a great job, pick up a trade, and then go to college afterwards. And oh, by the way, you'll grow up along the way. You'll be 4 years older. You'll be a little more focused, and you won't be so concerned about going out and drinking with your pals, when you should be studying. That's just Steve Giblin's view on things. So,
look, man, I appreciate you, coming on the podcast. This was a really great talk, really great interview, and it
was my pleasure.
Thank you so much. I want to talk to you a little bit after the interview. I'm just gonna, it was really fun having you on, though. So thank you. If there's any closing words that you want to give to the young people out there, just anybody listening, feel free.
Go out and do great things. Take ownership of the country.
Will do.
All right.